Hey guys, tonight we dive deep into a time when warmth was more of a dream than a reality, and dinner often involved something lumpy and suspicious pulled out of the ground. You've just arrived barely in a muddy, soot-coloured village somewhere in medieval Europe. The year doesn't matter much because frankly the winters have all blended into one long frost-bitten memory. The sky is heavy with grey clouds and the smell of wood smoke clings to everything, even though it's not particularly warm anywhere. Your boots, if you can call them that, are made from stiff scraps of hide tied together with what might be sinew or possibly twine. Either way, they're not waterproof and your feet are soaked before you even reach your new home. You're trudging through ankle-deep mud mixed with things you sincerely hope are just compost. Welcome to winter. It's your first year on this side of the 1300s, and already you're questioning your life choices. You're given a hut which generously resembles a shed that's lost a bet with a strong wind. The roof is thatch, the walls are timber packed with wattle and daub, essentially sticks and mud, and there's a single tiny window. Spoiler, it doesn't open or close. You're not entirely sure it's even glass. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and the time you're tuning in. I'd love to know who else is suffering the medieval chill with you tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Inside, the air smells like damp straw and the faint sour scent of previous occupants. There's a fire pit in the center of the floor, but no chimney, just a hole in the roof. If the smoke doesn't rise perfectly straight up, which it almost never does, it just sort of lives with you. Your eyes water constantly, but that's fine. Medieval emotions were mostly just soot-related anyway. You unpack your belongings. They consist of one blanket that feels more like a curtain, a small wooden bowl, a wooden spoon you've already lost, and half a turnip. Not a cooked one, just raw and deeply judgmental. You stare at it for a while, wondering whether to name it. You probably won't survive this, but the good news is, neither will most of the people around you. Misery loves company. Outside, the village is a series of low huts like yours, scattered around a central area that might be a square or might just be a path that froze mid-step. The mud here is legendary. When it freezes, it becomes a sort of landscape feature. Ice ruts that twist ankles and spirits alike. When it thaws, it reverts to quicksand. You meet your neighbor, Osric. He's wearing a cloak that once had ambition but now functions as a portable rag. He nods in that slow winter stiff way and says something about the turnips being decent this year. You wonder what decent means when it's the only thing you're allowed to eat. By your second day, the cold starts to make decisions for you. You move slower, your fingers barely respond, your breath hangs visibly in the air indoors. There's no insulation unless you count stuffing extra straw into the walls, which you do until rats begin to consider your home their winter Airbnb. Still, historians still argue whether medieval people truly felt the cold more intensely, or whether they just complained louder in surviving texts. Either way, you're absolutely freezing. The village steward calls a meeting to explain the rationing, which means you get fewer turnips than you were already failing to enjoy. Bread is technically available, but it's made with flour that contains more sawdust than you're entirely comfortable with. They call it filler. You call it betrayal. You hear stories of feasts, wild boar and roast apples, dripping fat and laughter, but that's for lords and feast days. You, my frostbitten friend, get a single chunk of root vegetable, boiled until it's confused about its own identity, and maybe a pinch of salt if someone's in a good mood. Your days are short. The sun rises late, sulks around the sky for a few hours, and disappears before you've even finished cursing the cold. Time loses its shape. You stop measuring by hours and start marking days by how many turnips you've eaten. Yes, it's already become a habit. The local friar gives you advice on staying warm, none of which helps. Keep moving, he says, while he wraps his hands in layers of wool. Pray, he adds, clearly not sweating. Turnip stew helps the soul, he lies. You find yourself daydreaming about things like woolen socks and thermal leggings. Medieval you has no idea those exist, of course, but somewhere in the back of your frost-numbed brain, a future version of you is screaming about central heating and electric blankets. One evening, as you huddle by the smouldering embers of your fire pit, trying not to think about the frost creeping up your spine, you hear the eerie howl of the wind outside, or possibly wolves. Historians debate whether wolf attacks were truly common, or just a convenient excuse to explain missing sheep and the occasional cousin. Your dreams are fragmented. You dream of warmth, then wake up clutching a turnip like it's a teddy bear. You name it Gerald. He is your only friend now. By now, your breath fogs up the inside of your hut so thickly that you draw faces in the condensation for entertainment. You think about making a puppet out of straw, but then worry it might be possessed because everything in medieval stories is. And so your first full week in the medieval winter limps along. You've learned that firewood is precious, turnips are emotional support tubers, and everyone smells vaguely of wet wool and sadness. You're not entirely sure if your fingers still work, but that's fine. You've moved beyond needing fingers, or toes, or happiness, but you've survived the first bite of winter. Congratulations, only 3, maybe 4 months to go, assuming you don't get cholera, or eaten by wolves, or accidentally marry Gerald the turnip in a fever dream. Morning comes slowly in the medieval winter, if you can call it morning, when the sun barely drags itself above the horizon before retreating again like it changed its mind. You wake up stiff, cold, and oddly sentimental about the warmth of your own breath. Gerald the turnip is still next to you, slightly shriveled but ever loyal. You nod to him before dragging yourself upright. Today's mission is survival, but with a very specific submission: gathering fuel. Because in this world, firewood is more valuable than whatever currency they're pretending to use. You step outside into the biting wind, eyes narrowed against the icy sting, and head toward the forest line, or what's left of it. Most of the trees nearby have already been sacrificed to the fire gods, and what remains is scrappy and stubborn. There's a common saying around the village: he who gathers wood warms twice, once while chopping it and once while burning it. What they don't mention is that you also get frostbite both times. You and 3 others, Osric included, set off with crude axes and a shared sense of deep regret. The snow crunches beneath your feet, hard and unforgiving. The trees are bare skeletons, reaching toward the sky like they're begging to be spared. You find a fallen branch and immediately pounce on it, like a raccoon spotting a pizza crust. Everything you collect goes into a large woven basket slung across your back, growing heavier with each reluctant stick. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had designated areas for gathering fuel, or whether it was more of a grab and hope you don't get caught system. Today it feels very much like the latter. You stay low and avoid eye contact with the reeve. He's the guy who enforces the Lord's forest rights, and he looks like someone who enjoys confiscating bundles from cold people. On your way back, you spot a pile of what looks like dried cow dung, and Osric lights up like it's Christmas. He explains cheerfully that dung burns just fine if it's dry, and it even gives off a comforting smell. You decide Osric might have spent one winter too many out here. Still, you grab a few pieces. Desperation is an excellent deodorizer. Back at your hut, you set up a modest fire. The smoke curls up and out the roof hole like a lazy ghost. It doesn't offer much heat, but you sit next to it anyway, soaking up the psychological warmth if not the physical kind. You think about writing in a journal, something poetic, maybe something about survival and strength, but then remember you can't write. Also, paper is luxury. Also, pens don't exist. You sigh, draw a doodle of Gerald in the dirt and call it art. Lunch is, brace yourself, a different turnip. This one is smaller, a little softer, and less emotionally supportive. You chop it into chunks and drop it into a pot with some melted snow and a pinch of something that might be a herb or might be a splinter. Either way, it's flavor. As you stir the pot with your reclaimed spoon, it rolled under a mat of straw yesterday. You reflect on how deeply your standards have fallen. This time last year, you were disappointed when your pizza crust was slightly burnt. Now you'd kill for a crumb of that crust. Gerald wisely says nothing. The fire hisses quietly as it eats away at your precious twigs. Outside, the village trudges on. Children wrap themselves in layers of rags and play a slow-motion version of tag. Dogs bark half-heartedly at shadows. A woman walks by muttering to herself about geese that aren't right this year, and you pretend to understand. At some point, a visitor arrives, a tinker with a cart full of rusty tools, broken pots, and wild rumors. He speaks in a voice like cracked parchment and offers to trade a bent nail for half a boiled turnip. You say no, Gerald is not for sale, but you do eavesdrop shamelessly while he talks about the next village over where they've got eels in their stream, if you can believe it. You can't, but it's nice to pretend. Later in the day, you and Osric discuss insulating your hut better. He suggests hanging wet animal skins over the walls. You wonder aloud if that will help with heat. He shrugs and says, probably not, but it keeps the ghosts out. You're not sure whether to be reassured or deeply alarmed. By dusk, which is basically mid-afternoon, the cold sets in like a second skin. You bundle up in every piece of cloth you own, layering them until you resemble a very depressed scarecrow. You try to read the sky for signs of better weather, but mostly see clouds shaped like disappointment. Inside again, you tend the fire with reverence. Every twig and dung chip you add is like a prayer. You tuck your blanket tighter around your shoulders and lean close enough to singe your eyebrows. Across the hut, Gerald watches from his honorary place on the windowsill. You tell him about the tinker, about the eels, and about how Osric might be part raccoon. Quirky note, some fringe historians believe peasants would place carved turnips near their homes to ward off evil spirits, especially in winter. You wonder if Gerald qualifies, then decide he definitely does. You draw a tiny face on him with a charred stick, just in case. The night falls in layers. Dark clouds, darker woods, and the darkest thoughts of all, like what you'll do when your turnips run out. You've heard whispers about acorn bread, which is about as appetizing as it sounds. You've also heard about boiling tree bark. Desperate times, desperate recipes. Sleep doesn't come easily, so you hum to yourself. A low, tuneless hum, the kind that makes the shadows feel a little less heavy. You stare at the ceiling and listen to the wind crawl through the cracks like a cold snake. Tomorrow you'll have to trade something for salt. You're hoping the bark doll you made yesterday can pass as a toy rather than a cry for help. And who knows, maybe you'll hear more about those eels. Maybe someone will find an actual herb. Maybe you'll find a way to make this turnip stew taste like something other than despair. But for now you're here. The fire is still glowing. Gerald is still watching. You've made it through another day, and in this medieval winter, that's saying something. You wake up before dawn because, well, your blanket is a liar and the fire has betrayed you. Again, the cold creeps into your bones like a passive-aggressive roommate. It doesn't scream, it just makes you slowly more miserable until you give up and get out of bed. You rub your hands together and whisper a few motivational words to Gerald. He's frosty this morning, which feels symbolic somehow. Today's adventure is an essential one, making sure your roof doesn't collapse under snow and figuring out if any of your neighbors are secretly hoarding fat, salty ham. Not that you'll steal it, probably, but you need to know. You step outside and immediately regret everything. Snow has fallen overnight again, and your modest hut roof now holds a dense layer that threatens to cave in under its own indifference. You grab a long stick and begin poking at the thatch from below, hoping to dislodge some of the weight. It works, sort of. You're soon covered in powdery snow, looking like you've lost a bet with winter itself. The village is unusually quiet this morning. Smoke curls from a few chimneys, and one guy, Joffrey, who always insists he used to be a knight squire, but is clearly just a squire of poor choices, is hacking away at a log with a knife that's seen better centuries. You nod at him. He nods back, then returns to losing the argument with his firewood. Your stomach growls, so you dig around your storage pit, rid a hole with sticks over it, and find your last semi-firm turnip. You peel it with a piece of flint, trying to remember if eating it raw is fine or certain death. Historians still argue whether peasants commonly ate root vegetables raw or always cooked them, though it probably depended on how close they were to total collapse. You munch it anyway. It tastes like soil and regret. You head toward Osric's hut, which smells faintly of something edible, maybe soup, maybe boiled sock, hard to say. He's tinkering with a net made of hair and old string, insisting it's a game trap. You nod, half impressed, half concerned. Osric explains he's hoping to catch a rabbit, or at the very least a confused pigeon. You offer to help bait the trap, and after some deliberation, you sacrifice a tiny piece of turnip. Gerald watches this betrayal in silence. As you walk through the village, you notice signs of resourcefulness everywhere. A child with bright red cheeks carries a bucket of frozen water, chipping off pieces to melt later. Someone has stitched two cloaks together into one super cloak. Fashion is survival now. And outside one hut, strips of something suspiciously meat-like hang drying on a rope. Could be rat, could be hope. You stop by the communal pit in the center of town, where an elder woman named Maud holds court like a queen with no throne. She's stirring something thick and vaguely yellow in a massive pot. You ask what it is, and she replies, root surprise. The surprise is that it has no taste, but you smile, and she lets you dip your crust of bread into it. That bread, by the way, it's mostly rye flour mixed with sawdust. That's not a joke. Some medieval communities really did cut flour with tree bark or sawdust to stretch their supplies. It's chewy, dense, and weirdly filling, like edible guilt. You chew slowly and pretend you're at a feast. You even raise an imaginary goblet to Gerald, who obviously didn't come with you but is there in spirit. There's talk around the pit about a traveling monk passing through in a few days. Apparently he carries blessings and dried plums. You're skeptical about the plums, but the blessings might be worth it. The villagers plan to offer him turnip wine, which sounds like something you'd drink during a dare or a medieval divorce. You return to your hut, cheeks stinging from the wind, and sit down beside your fire, which has dwindled into a sulky little ember. You coax it back to life with a handful of dried grass and a deep, motivational speech about resilience. It works, sort of. Time for some light repairs. You grab your thatch bundle, dried reeds mostly, and patch the inside of the roof where the snowmelt has begun to trickle in. You use mud and hope as mortar. As you work, you mutter about your contractor being a total flake. That joke never gets old, mostly because everything else does. Around mid-afternoon, Osric returns with surprising news. Someone down the road claims to have spotted a deer, a real one. You both look at each other in reverent silence, the kind reserved for miracles and well-cooked eggs. A deer could mean meat, bones for broth, even leather, but also, hunting a deer in this weather with your tools, a forked stick and passive-aggressive shouting seems unlikely. Still, the talk revives something in the village, hushed excitement, a shared whisper of possibility. Plans begin forming, crude maps are scratched into snow, and someone volunteers to charm the deer with a flute. You try not to laugh, or cry, or both. You spend the evening sharpening sticks, if you can call it that. Mostly it's rubbing one end of a branch against a rock until it looks mildly pointy, but it's something to do, and at this point distraction is almost as good as food. The wind howls outside like it's auditioning for a ghost story. Inside, the fire glows. You huddle near it, poking the coals gently and telling yourself it's going to be okay, because you've got turnips, you've got a hut, you've got a spear-shaped stick and a possibly imaginary deer to chase tomorrow, and you've got Gerald, who hasn't betrayed you yet, unlike that blanket. The morning arrives not with a sunrise but with a sort of pale ambient shrug from the sky. There's light, yes, but it's the kind of light that makes you question whether the sun even tried. You step outside, teeth chattering, to join the others gathering for the great deer hunt, which is a bit optimistic considering nobody actually has a bow or arrows or experience. Still, hope's a stubborn thing, like that patch of mold on the back wall you keep meaning to scrape off but secretly think might be insulating the place. You join Osric and 3 others, Hilda, who could probably take on a bear if sufficiently annoyed, Wymond, who once mistook a goat for a ghost, and little Edric, who insists he can smell venison through walls. Together, you form the least threatening hunting party since whatever band of fools decided to chase mammoths with sticks. Armed with crude spears, a net that looks like it may have been woven by a drunk spider, and a single piece of dried apple for bait, you venture toward the woods. Snow crunches underfoot, deep and thick in some places, with icy patches that send Wyman skidding more than once. He claims it's a tracking technique. You don't press the issue. The forest stands still, draped in winter's silence. Not even birdsong, just the eerie hush of trees frozen mid-breath. You imagine the deer watching you from a distance, mildly amused, already planning its escape route. Still, the group presses on, eyes scanning for hoofprints or droppings, anything that says hope still walks here. You find tracks, could be deer, could be a very large dog with hooves. Historians still debate whether rural communities accurately tracked game or often followed completely unrelated animals in circles until frostbite made the decisions for them. You crouch near the trail, examining the imprints. They lead deeper into the woods, toward an old copse where the snow thins beneath ancient trees. The group spreads out, flanking wide. You're told to carry the net, mostly because you're the only one with fingers still fully functioning. You accept this honor and burden. Time passes strangely when you're cold, hopeful and terrified of disappointing a hungry village. Minutes stretch, hours compress. Eventually, a sudden crack, branches snapping. Hilda's voice hisses through the trees. Movement. You drop into a crouch so quickly you nearly become part of the terrain. Through the frost-laced underbrush, a shape moves 4 legs, graceful, cautious. A deer, a real one. Breath escapes your lungs like you've seen a unicorn. The creature pauses, ears twitching, nose sniffing the air as if it already knows you haven't bathed in 3 months. Everyone freezes, even Wymond, then chaos. Hilda charges early, perhaps thinking brute force and sheer willpower would be enough. The deer bolts, Edric yelps and throws the apple, which hits Osric squarely in the head. You lunge forward, flinging the net, which sails magnificently, into a bush. The deer disappears like a vanishing act, gone, leaving nothing but hoofprints and broken dreams. Silence returns. Everyone breathes, then laughs. It's not mirthful, exactly. It's the kind of laughter born from hunger, exhaustion, and knowing you really gave it your best ridiculous try. There's a strange comfort in failure when it's shared, and nobody expected success anyway. You trudge back through the snow, spirits not exactly high, but weirdly intact. Osric nurses an apple-shaped bruise. Hilda carries a broken stick like a fallen banner. Edric insists he almost had it. You don't correct him. Back in the village, there's no shame in your return. Everyone nods knowingly. You tried. That's currency here. You're handed a bowl of something warm, mostly turnip water with a trace of onion skin, and you drink it like it's a royal banquet. Later, by the fire, you reflect. Hunting without proper tools in the dead of winter was always going to be a fool's errand. But then again, surviving winter with only turnips is already a bit of a cosmic joke, so maybe you're just leaning into the theme. You patch your net. It's still useless, but it's symbolic now, like a medieval participation trophy. By twilight, a different kind of miracle. A passing tinker arrives in the village, bundled in layers, dragging a sled of rusted pans and glass bottles. He's skeletal, probably hallucinating half the time, but he brings news, and a wheel of hard cheese. Real cheese. You can smell it from 10 paces. He claims he traded for it from a monastery far south, where monks make it with spiritual fervor and sheep's milk. Historians still argue whether cheese-making monks were better fed than the rest of the population, or just better at hiding their snacks. Either way, this wheel of cheese is pure treasure. A barter begins. The tinker wants dried mushrooms and wool. The village offers turnip mash, 2 cracked combs, and a carved spoon depicting a confused-looking cat. The negotiations last an hour. Ultimately, the spoon tips the scales. The tinker departs with a song about frostbite and loneliness. You get to smell the cheese. Not eat, just smell. Still worth it. That night, you dream of warm stew, thick with meat and herbs. In your sleep, the deer returns, this time offering you a cup of hot broth and a blanket. You wake up smiling, briefly believing in magic before you realize Gerald has drooled on your sleeve. Again, you stretch, feeling every ache of yesterday's chase, but there's something in your bones now, pride maybe, or possibly just arthritis. You didn't catch the deer, but you tried. You made it through another day. You still have half a turnip and the memory of cheese, and sometimes that's enough. You wake the next morning to the sound of someone vomiting behind the hovel. Not the most inspiring alarm clock, but accurate, given last night's communal soup included a questionable handful of fermented cabbage. Gerald, the village's self-appointed culinary experimenter, insists it was fine. You suspect otherwise. You push open the creaking door, breathe in air so cold it might have crystallized your eyebrows, and brace yourself. Today is not for hunting. Today is for making sure you don't freeze to death in your sleep. Again, firewood is your mission. Or, more accurately, the search for something that burns, which doesn't necessarily include wood at this point in the winter. Most trees nearby are picked clean of anything burnable. You've already tried dried dung, smells exactly how you'd expect, peat better, but takes forever to dry, and once in sheer desperation Gerald's poetry scrolls. That burned fast, and possibly cursed the house. You join a few others trudging toward the edge of the village. The snow is deeper now, packed and glassy, and each step threatens to slip out from under you like some slapstick nightmare. Your feet are wrapped in layers of rags, stiff from frost, toes numb but holding on. You imagine them as tiny exhausted soldiers just trying to finish their shift. You reach the forest's edge, where the underbrush is sparse, and trees are bare, brittle and sighing in the wind. You look for fallen branches, bark, even twigs. Anything dry is a gift. You spot something promising, an old twisted root poking through a drift, and tug until it finally gives. Victory, or at least a small moral triumph. Osric finds a patch of dry brambles and carefully gathers it into his sack. Wymond, of course, claims to have found ancient magical bark, which turns out to be a piece of old shoe. Historians still debate how accurate medieval villagers were at identifying useful fire materials, but when you're desperate, everything looks flammable if you squint. As the hours pass, the pile of fuel grows. It's not impressive, but enough for tonight. You even find a chunk of pitch-coated driftwood by the frozen riverbank, probably from an old boat or someone's forgotten fishing hut. It smells like adventure and rot. You bring it back proudly. Back in the village, the fires have mostly gone out. Only a few smoke trails curl from rooftops. Fuel is precious now, and not every hearth stays lit. You share your haul with 3 households, each contributing something in return. A boiled turnip slice here, a bit of old cloth for stuffing your shoes there. The barter system is in full swing. That evening you sit by the rekindled fire. The brambles crackle loudly, sparks leaping like startled fleas. The smell is a mix of wood smoke, melting snow, and faintly, whatever's still festering in Gerald's soup pot. Cozy, in a grim, historically accurate way. Someone tells a story, because fire requires stories, and silence around flames is just sad. This one's about a winter so cold, a knight rode across the frozen Thames to duel a goose who'd stolen his bread. Obviously untrue, probably. Still you laugh. The absurdity feels familiar. You add a branch to the fire and watch the flames catch. Fire hypnotizes. You stare until your thoughts soften at the edges, until time feels syrupy. It's easy to forget how crucial warmth is until it's gone. Here now, in this circle of flickering light, you feel rich. Your fingers begin to thaw. Painfully, at first prickling, then stinging. You flex them slowly, like they're shy to return to service. It's strange how something as basic as heat can feel like luxury. You promise yourself, once this is over, you'll never complain about summer again. Ever. Even when the mosquitoes come. Someone brings up the greenwood laws, and you all groan. Technically you're not supposed to gather firewood from the Lord's forest, even if it's fallen, even if it's literally saving lives. Historians still argue whether these laws were enforced out of greed or simply bureaucratic absurdity. Either way, everyone breaks them. Quietly, often, the flames dim lower, the pitch wood crackles with a sharp pop, sending sparks skyward. You're not sure if it's drying the room or summoning ghosts. Either feels possible. You use the last of the driftwood and settle in near the heat. Your cloak smells of smoke and damp wool. You wrap it tighter. Your breath fogs in front of you. Sleep is near. Before you lie down, you stuff extra rags into your boots and tuck a hot stone near your chest. A trick you learned early on. Not hot enough to burn, just enough to pretend for an hour or two that you're warmer than you are. You drift slowly, the warmth like a fading dream. Outside, the wind picks up. Snow whispers against the wooden walls. Somewhere, an owl hoots, probably mocking you. But inside, there's fire. There's a story. There's enough. You remember the cheese from 2 nights ago. You still haven't forgiven yourself for not licking it when you had the chance. The fire sputters once more. You close your eyes. Just one more night down. You wake with a start, unsure if it was a dream or a draft that jolted you. The fire's out again, and your left hand is curled around that now cold stone you thought was a brilliant bedtime heater. Your breath puffs visibly in the dim grey light of dawn. At least your eyebrows are still attached. Today is laundry day. Don't get excited. There's no soap, no sudsy basin, and definitely no dryer sheets. You're going to wash your clothes in the freezing river with freezing hands while a goose hisses at you because you stepped too close to its secret ice nest. Honestly, you deserve better. You wrap yourself in your outer tunic, still damp from yesterday's snow, and gather the pile of laundry, which consists of a few stiff undershirts, a pair of hose that could double as cardboard, and a surprisingly heavy wool cloak that smells strongly of smoke, onions, and melancholy. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly didn't notice how badly they all smelled, or if they were just too frozen to care. Down by the river, the ice has receded just enough at the edges to expose a small channel of moving water. You join the others already there, kneeling on slippery rocks, teeth clenched, hands red. The trick is to keep moving, to beat and wring the clothes with rhythm, or else your fingers go numb and you end up flailing like a confused seal. Someone's already dropped a sock in the current. You watch it swirl away like a tiny woolen boat, its future now completely out of your control. You feel this deep in your soul. Your own cloak hits the water with a wet slap, releasing a smell so foul a nearby dog actually whimpers and trots away. You rub it on a rock, because that's how it's done. Abrasion over luxury, dirt versus stone. Nature's washing board. If you're lucky, there's ash soap, a gritty concoction made of lye and animal fat, but not today. Today, it's just water and willpower. A little farther downstream, someone's singing, badly. It's either a folk tune or an attempt to summon warmth from another realm. You hum along half-heartedly, though you're too focused on not slipping into the river. Hypothermia is not the preferred way to end this chapter of your medieval adventure. The process is slow, and your hands ache as you wring each piece dry. You try to shake off the water, but it clings stubbornly, like a clingy ex who smells like turnips and never really understood your dreams. Eventually the laundry is as clean as it's going to get. You drape the garments over bushes and branches to freeze dry in the wind. There's a strange satisfaction in seeing your clothes flutter in the icy breeze like ancient tattered flags, proof that you're trying, that you're surviving. Of course the drying process will take hours, maybe days, so you pull on the least wet shirt and the least frozen hose and shuffle back to the village looking like someone who just wrestled a river monster and lost. Back in your hut you set up a laundry line over what's left of the morning's fire. It's more for the illusion of productivity than actual drying. The smoke curls around the cloth, adding another layer of scent. You decide not to care. You're too cold to care. A neighbor stops by with a frozen fish. He says it's a gift, though it's unclear whether it's food or just something he didn't want to deal with. You thank him anyway, because manners matter, even when your cloak smells like despair. As you gut the fish carefully, using the flint knife you've kept surprisingly sharp, you notice tiny worms in the flesh, a gift that keeps on giving. Historians still debate how common fish parasites were in the medieval diet, but one thing is certain: if it squirmed, you either cooked it longer or didn't mention it. You boil the fish with some herbs and a sliver of turnip. The resulting stew is technically edible. You tell yourself it's medicinal. Your stomach disagrees but has no other options. Outside, the village continues its quiet rhythm. Smoke from other huts curls lazily upward. Children chase each other with sticks, because toys are for rich kids. An old woman is yelling at a chicken again, which may or may not be part of a complex pagan ritual. It's hard to say. You hang your damp cloak closer to the fire and crouch beside it, watching droplets hiss as they fall onto the coals. The warmth is faint but real. You sit with it for a while, not thinking, not planning, just being. In winter, even that is work. Someone knocks 3 soft raps. It's Wymond, asking if you've seen his lost mitten. You haven't, but you lie, and say you'll keep an eye out. He nods solemnly, as if this is a matter of national importance, and trudges off with the gravity of a man on a secret mission. You wonder if he actually owned mittens or just wants yours. Eventually you lie down again, the day behind you. You've washed, you've cooked, you've survived the fish. Your fingers are raw, your cloak is soggy, and your toes may never feel again, but you made it. One more day scratched into the invisible ledger of winter. Tomorrow, you'll try not to eat your laundry. You wake to the sound of something scratching. It's faint, irregular, and probably either a mouse trying to get into your food stash or your stomach attempting to file a complaint. You lay there for a moment, wrapped in your stiff, semi-dry cloak, contemplating the idea of just not moving. But the cold doesn't allow that kind of laziness. It bites through fabric and fatigue alike. With great reluctance you sit up, blink at the pale light trickling in through the cracks in the wall, and remember today's plan. Trade, not glamorous trade. No spices, silk or gold coins here. Just root vegetables, animal skins, and maybe that one half-carved wooden spoon you've been meaning to finish since October. Your village doesn't have a market, per se, more like a trampled patch of mud where people show up once a week with whatever they haven't already eaten, burned or lost. And today is one of those days. You bundle yourself in every layer you own, including the still damp shirt from yesterday's river escapade, and head out with your burlap sack. Inside a few turnips, obviously a handful of dried nettles, and your prized item, a small bottle of rendered goose fat. That last one is valuable in winter, not just for cooking but as a skin salve, lamp fuel, or impromptu beard gloss. Multi-purpose luxury. Outside, the ground crunches underfoot, snow, frost, or just centuries of disappointment. You nod at a neighbor also trudging toward the gathering spot, both of you too cold for small talk. Besides, conversations in winter are mostly a series of grunts and shared nods, the universal language of "we're still alive, barely." The marketplace is already bustling in the way a medieval winter marketplace can bustle, meaning 12 people, one goat, and someone sneezing repeatedly in the background. A woman is selling wool, thick, itchy, and glorious. Another man is bartering smoked squirrel, his breath fogging the air as he tries to convince passers-by that this particular squirrel lived a good fat life. You stake out a spot and spread your goods like a proud vendor at a luxury fair. A child eyes your turnips. You gently shoo him away. This is high-stakes trading, not a petting zoo. A man named Aldred stops and squints at your goose fat. "That from your own bird?" he asks, in the kind of tone that makes it sound like he's accusing you of something. You lie and say yes. He grunts approvingly and offers you 2 onions for it. You counter with 1 onion and a small beeswax candle. He raises an eyebrow. You maintain eye contact. Eventually you strike a deal. Victorious, you pocket the candle and resist the urge to gloat. In medieval winter trade terms, that's practically insider trading. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers truly adhered to any consistent barter system or if it was all just gut feeling and mutual desperation. Based on this experience, desperation wins by a mile. You trade the nettles to a woman who makes healing poultices, though her eye keeps twitching as she talks, so you're unsure how much healing is actually involved. She offers you dried apples in return. You accept because fruit is a luxury even if it tastes vaguely like shoe leather. A man with frostbitten fingers offers you a carved bone comb for 2 turnips. You hesitate. It's intricate and oddly beautiful, but it smells faintly of soup. Still you agree. A good comb is hard to come by, and your hair is beginning to resemble straw mixed with raven nest. As the morning fades to midday, not that the sun ever truly shows up, you take stock of your gains: a candle, some onions, a few apples, and a haunted-looking comb. Not bad, not great, but not bad. Then you hear it, a soft rhythmic beat coming from the far end of the clearing. Someone's playing a drum, not well mind you, but with heart. You shuffle toward the sound, more out of curiosity than purpose. A young man stands near a fire pit, tapping on a goatskin drum, probably trying to keep spirits up or fingers warm. A small crowd has gathered, and someone else is singing. It's off-key and borderline alarming, but everyone claps along. Music in winter is like sunlight. It doesn't have to be good, just present. You tap your foot along. Just once. That's enough. The moment doesn't last, of course. A sudden gust of wind kicks snow across the market, and the drumbeat falters. People wrap themselves tighter and start packing up. The goat sneezes. You head home with your newly bartered goods, your sack lighter but your spirit slightly heavier in a good way. There's something oddly fulfilling about swapping things. You gave away food, sure, but you brought back survival tools. Candlelight, nourishment, personal grooming, all small victories, but victories nonetheless. Back at the hut, you set the candle carefully on your rough-hewn shelf. You'll light it later maybe, or maybe you'll just stare at it and feel fancy. The onions go into your food pile, the apples you nibble right away, chewy and a bit sour, but still better than more turnips. And the comb, well, you try it on your hair, which resists the attempt like it's been personally offended. But a few stubborn passes, and you've at least detangled one corner. Progress. As you stoke the fire, the faint drumbeat still echoes in your mind. You close your eyes for a moment and picture that little circle of villagers clapping in the cold, half frozen but still sharing something. Tomorrow you'll have to scrape the soot off your ceiling again, and maybe trap something edible. But for now you sit, and you breathe, and you chew your apple. And you're warm. Sort of. The candle from your bartering hall flickers faintly in the corner. You haven't lit it yet. No, that would be reckless. Candles are currency, light and comfort wrapped into one tiny melting stick. You're saving it for something truly dark in every sense of the word. Tonight, a fire will have to do, though the wood is growing scarce, and every log you burn is a tiny betrayal of your future self. But you've got bigger problems right now, rodents. You knew it would come to this. They're winter's true survivors, furred little opportunists who know how to chew through sacks, scale rafters and steal food while making it sound like ghosts are living in your walls. You've tried hanging your turnips from the ceiling, sealing your stores in baskets, even whispering vague threats toward the floorboards. None of it has worked. So, tonight you set a trap. Nothing fancy, just a bit of dried apple tied to a string suspended over a bucket. If the mouse is bold and clumsy, you might have a shot. If it's clever, well, you'll probably hear it snickering at you in your sleep. There's a long scholarly debate over how serious the rodent problem really was in the average medieval cottage. Some historians argue that infestation was constant but tolerated. Others claim it was seasonal and manageable, but then again, most of those historians don't sleep in dirt-floored huts with apple-baited buckets as their primary line of defense. You settle near the hearth, cloak pulled tightly, staring at your makeshift trap. It's hard not to root for the mouse a little. You get it, everyone's just trying to survive. But if it touches your candle stash, it's war. Then there's the other kind of pest, human. Specifically, bored neighbors. It turns out that when people are trapped in tiny villages with few chores and fewer teeth, gossip becomes a kind of winter sport. You hear the shuffle before the knock. One of your neighbors, Elric, a man who never learned to speak in anything below a bellow. He enters without waiting for your invitation because courtesy froze sometime back in November. I heard you got onions, he says, already sniffing the air like a half-trained hound. You don't deny it. You also don't offer to share. The last time Elric borrowed something, it was your sewing needle, and you're pretty sure it came back shorter. He flops near the fire, steam rising from his damp boots. Terrible day. Mice chewed through my boot strap. Probably came from your house, he grumbles, as if the rodents signed a lease agreement under your floorboards. You smile politely, the way one does at wolves or visiting in-laws. He stays for a while, grumbling about the mayor, the snow, the price of dried fish, and the fact that the local priest insists on fasting during the most food-scarce season of the year. Holiness doesn't fill your belly, Elric mutters. Eventually he leaves, taking a few degrees of body heat with him. You stare at the door for a full minute afterward, just to make sure he doesn't come back for dessert, which you don't have. You check the mouse trap again, no luck. Either it's too smart or too polite to steal while you're watching. The fire crackles, you poke it with a stick that's only mildly damp and tell yourself you're managing. Not thriving, exactly, but functioning. In medieval terms, that's practically a miracle. For a bit of variety, you decide to examine your inventory. Not just food but supplies. You open your storage box, a crate that used to hold salted fish in someone else's life, and lay things out. Let's see, 3 more turnips, 1.5 onions, 2 bruised apples, a pouch of dried herbs, a nearly empty jar of lard, the candle, your new bone comb, a scrap of linen and a feather. You don't remember where the feather came from, but it's soft, and that feels like a luxury, so you keep it. You also have a sliver of soap. It's gone oddly hard in the cold, and you're unsure if it still works. But it smells faintly of rosemary, and when you sniff it you feel briefly like a wealthy lord who owns multiple pairs of shoes. You put everything back neatly, like you're running your own tiny store, one where the shelves mostly mock you. Suddenly, a clatter. You turn fast, your trap. You approach, holding your breath. There it is, a tiny grey mouse sitting in the bucket, confused but unharmed. You blink at it, it blinks at you. You could eat it, technically. People do, not proudly, but they do. But it's so small, so furry, and frankly, it looks like it's having a worse winter than you. You sigh, you lower the bucket, and tip it gently toward the door. The mouse scurries away into the snow, like it's late for something important. Maybe tomorrow you won't be so soft. Maybe. Later, as you lie on your wooden pallet, you think about food, not because you're starving, though you are, but because thinking about food has become your new favorite pastime. You imagine hot stew, fresh bread, roasted chicken, a feast with friends, loud laughter, overflowing mugs. Then you remember, you have friends like Elric. You smile into the dark, wrap your arms around your belly, and pull your cloak tighter. The wind outside picks up, whistling through the cracks in the walls. It sounds like the forest itself is sighing. The candle still sits unlit, waiting for a darker day. But tonight you're okay with the firelight. It dances gently on the ceiling, and you count the shadows it casts, one for each thing you own, and maybe one for each person who didn't survive the last winter. You make it through another night. That's enough. The next morning begins before the sun even thinks about rising. You're awakened not by birdsong, because let's face it, any bird with sense flew south months ago, but by the stiff ache in your back and the unmistakable sound of someone attempting to chop frozen wood, rhythmically, badly. You roll off your pallet with the grace of a dropped sack of flour, stretch and feel at least 3 joints protest. It's another day in the medieval winter, and your body already seems to know it. Outside, your neighbor Eldwin is wrestling with a log. By wrestling, you mean he's swinging his dull axe like it insulted his mother, barely nicking the frostbitten surface. You watch from the doorway for a moment, your cloak wrapped tightly, and consider giving him tips. You don't, of course, because you're cold, tired, and frankly a little entertained. He sees you and nods. Wood's too wet, he grunts, wiping his brow. You nod back. You both know it's not just the wood. The ground is frozen, the air stings. Even your breath sounds cold. Fuel is now your single biggest obsession, even more than food. Because without fire, your food doesn't cook, your hands don't work, and your toes might never forgive you. Medieval winters are, more than anything, long contests of heat conservation, and you, unfortunately, are not winning. You walk into the woods, if you can call them that. At this point it's mostly just regretful stumps and disappointed bushes. Still, you scavenge. Fallen branches, bits of bark, maybe a lucky knot of twigs. Some of it will smoke, some of it will hiss, and some of it will just sit there judging you. But you take it all. Historians still argue whether the average medieval peasant had a steady supply of firewood through winter or constantly faced shortages. Some say villages shared communal cutting schedules. Others believe the poorest families were forced to burn anything, old thatch, broken tools, even dried dung. And yes, that last one is not a myth. Dung fires were a thing. You haven't gotten there yet, but you're not above it. Let's just hope you don't need to explain that smell to Elric. You lug your haul back, arms shaking. A bundle of damp, half-frozen sticks feels like carrying a sleeping deer, but you're proud. It's fuel, it's survival. You've earned this. You split what you can, stack it to dry, which it probably won't, and feed a few choice pieces to your reluctant fire. It grumbles, hisses, then miraculously catches. The warmth is immediate and delicious. You hold your hands over the flame just close enough to feel it, not close enough to blister. You've learned that lesson. A pot goes over the fire. Inside turnip, onion, water and hope. You stir slowly, watching the colors change from pale to slightly less pale. It's not a stew, it's barely even soup, but it's warm, and it smells edible. As the turnip concoction simmers, your thoughts drift to those more fortunate. The local lord, for example. He probably has a roaring hearth, actual bread, maybe even cheese, a thick cloak lined with something that didn't come from a second-hand sheep. You imagine him sitting comfortably, nodding at servants who refill his goblet. Then you imagine him slipping on ice while walking across his fancy stone courtyard, and that helps. But here's the thing about wood. You burn it once, that's it, then it's gone, and you're back in the forest praying for fallen limbs and not another blizzard. You make a mental tally. If you stretch it, you've maybe got 3 days worth stacked. Maybe. And that's assuming Eldwin doesn't decide to borrow some. So you turn to alternatives. Old straw, ratty, brittle, full of memories. It burns fast and dirty, but it's something. A broken stool that's missing a leg, firewood. A cracked bowl, firewood. That weird stick that looks vaguely like your cousin, firewood. This is winter economics. Everything is either food, fuel, or wasted weight. Later, after your meal, you notice a strange smell wafting in from the chimney. It's smoky, but not normal smoky. More acidic. A little sharp. You look into the fire and realize that one of the logs was a bit green, possibly lichen covered, possibly a home to something that's now very dead and very aromatic. You open the door to let the air clear. The blast of cold is immediate and rude, but hey, it's either that or suffocate artistically in your own hut. You choose discomfort over drama. By evening you're back by the fire. The light dances on your walls, flickering over your few possessions. It's amazing how the shadows make everything look more mysterious. Your spoon becomes an ancient artifact. Your stool transforms into a wise elder. Your lard jar becomes a treasure chest, though to be fair it kind of is. You think about lighting the candle again, but no, not yet. Not while the fire lives. The candle is for the night when the fire dies early, when you're sick, or when something truly dark presses in through the shutters. You wrap up in every layer you own, hands in sleeves, feet under your cloak, and listen. The wind howls through the gaps, and a distant owl calls, a lonely sound like it's asking if anyone's still out there. You are. You're still here, and you've got wood for at least another day. You wake to silence, the eerie, muffled kind that means snow. Thick, fresh, untouched snow. You can't see it yet, but you know, the way the air holds its breath, the way the light through the shutters feels diffused and strange. You pull yourself upright, joints crackling like the firewood you no longer have, and nudge open the door. Yep, snow. A lot of it. The kind that looks beautiful for exactly 4 seconds before you remember you have to walk through it, dig it, and somehow keep your home from being swallowed by it. It's everywhere. The path you shoveled yesterday, gone. The stack of firewood outside, half buried. Your mood, somewhere under a snowdrift. You step out, cloak cinched tight, boots still damp from yesterday's adventure. The snow squeaks underfoot, that unmistakable sound of powder compressing into slush. It's beautiful, yes, but it's also dangerous. Snow is sneaky. It insulates and smothers, hides ice, weighs down roofs, and ruins any plans you might have had for a simple morning. You trudge to the woodpile like a winter soldier and dig it out with your gloved hands. You whisper a prayer to whichever saint is responsible for frozen lumber. Your fingers go numb almost immediately. But you're not about to skip the fire today, not unless you want to wake up tomorrow missing a few digits. The hearth is stone cold, and your first 3 attempts to light a flame end with more smoke than heat. You cough, squint, and curse the day you were born into a century without matches. Eventually a tiny flame takes hold, shivering, flickering, probably judging you. But it's alive, and that's enough. Today's mission, keep the roof from caving in. Sea snow's heavy, like insultingly heavy, especially when it's wet, which today's is. Medieval homes often had steep thatched roofs to help with runoff, but that doesn't mean they were immune to collapse. Historians still argue whether peasants routinely reinforced their homes in winter or simply accepted a portion of annual roof casualties as part of life. You don't plan to become a statistic, so you grab a pole, possibly once part of a fence, possibly a repurposed crutch, and you jab upward from inside your hut. The roof groans, a soft thud as snow slides off the edge. You poke again, more thuds. A chunk lands right outside the door, narrowly missing your drying shoes. You wince, then you laugh. It's ridiculous, really. You fighting the sky with a stick. A neighbor calls from down the path, Wulfric, possibly drunk, definitely underdressed. Snow's good for the crops, he hollers, waving a jug. You wave back, if we live to see them. He shrugs and disappears into the white. The rest of the morning passes in slow, soggy motion. You shovel a path to the well, muttering the whole way, and nearly slip 3 times. You fetch water with half-frozen hands and trudge back, swearing your next life will include indoor plumbing. Inside you peel off your outer layers, steam rising from your cloak as it thaws. You hang everything near the fire. carefully, because once last winter you got too close and nearly set your only tunic ablaze. You've learned your lesson, mostly. Now comes the real challenge, cooking in this cold. Today's gourmet delight. Boiled turnip with maybe a hint of old carrot. The root vegetables are showing signs of fatigue, squishy spots, odd smells, but they're still technically edible. You dice, you stir, you pretend it smells like something a noble might eat. Add a pinch of salt, a sprig of dried herb from the beam above the hearth, and voila, Michelin star mediocrity. You eat slowly, more for warmth than flavor. Each bite chases away a little chill from your insides, but you're also thinking about supplies, about whether you have enough food to make it another month, about the tiny leak in the wall that's starting to whisper in the corner. You really should fix that. You remember vaguely, something you overheard in the market last fall, a story about a family who survived winter by digging a tunnel between their house and their barn to avoid walking in the snow. Brilliant, unlikely, possibly made up, but you wish you had a barn to tunnel to, or a tunnel, or a barn. Instead you decide to stuff more moss into the gaps between the wall planks. You press it in with frozen fingers, each green tuft sealing out another thread of cold. Your home looks like it's wearing a mossy sweater. Honestly, not a bad aesthetic. Around mid-afternoon the wind picks up. It whistles through the trees, making the whole village creak. The snow shifts on the roof. You watch it from your doorway, sipping a thin broth and wondering if it'll fall or freeze solid and turn into an unmovable glacier. Either way, you've accepted that winter is now your roommate. A terrible one, doesn't clean, doesn't pay rent, occasionally tries to kill you. By evening you're exhausted, not from doing anything particularly strenuous but from simply being in this cold. The weight of staying warm, staying upright, staying sane, it's heavy. Heavier than the snow, even. Still the fire burns, the roof stands, and you're alive. That night you sit in the firelight, scratching a few marks on a piece of wood, your version of a calendar. One more day gone, one day closer to spring, or at least to the muddy, miserable thaw that pretends to be spring. You listen to the crackle of the flames, the howl of the wind, the soft drip of melting snow outside your window. You pull your blanket tighter and think about tomorrow. There's no avoiding it, no skipping ahead, but you've got fire, and a roof, and turnips. For now that's enough. You don't want to get up, not today, not when the frost has crept so far inside your hut that even your toes under the blanket feel like they're auditioning for life as icicles. You pull the covers tighter, burying yourself like a root vegetable in the dark safety of your bed, but the world outside doesn't care about your comfort. The fire's gone out. Again, you're down to 3 logs and a questionable twig pile, and your stomach? It's growling like a cursed wolf in a fairy tale. You swing your feet to the ground. It's so cold the floor bites. You mutter something that's definitely not a hymn and begin the slow, clumsy dance of dressing while shivering. Layers upon layers. Scratchy wool, stiff leather, and something that might have once been a sock but is now just sadness woven into a tube. Outside, the air is sharper than usual. You feel it immediately. That kind of biting cold that seems to whisper right into your bones. Should have been born in Italy. You chuckle, then cough from the sheer dry chill of it. The snow hasn't stopped. It's just shifted into something meaner, icy now, crusted and wind-sculpted. You try to walk on it and instead skate a few paces before regaining your balance. Graceful. Your daily ration today is not great. Half a turnip, a little salted meat you've been saving for a feast day that never came. You chew slowly, eyes fixed on nothing in particular, mind drifting into a thought spiral about spice routes, trade caravans, and how someone out there is probably eating roasted pigeon with herbs while lounging in a heated chamber. You're wondering how long you can keep rationing the turnips before you have to get creative. Food preservation in medieval winters was an art, if not a desperate experiment. Salting, smoking, and drying were the go-tos for meat. Root vegetables like turnips and parsnips were stored in cool cellars, buried in straw, or even kept in pits packed with snow. But if your cellar floods or your straw molds, well, bon appetit, moldy turnip. You carefully check your own stash again. A few turnips have gone soft, their smell bordering on betrayal. You cut off the worst parts, murmuring to yourself like a doctor giving a bleak prognosis. You try to laugh, but it sounds more like a whimper. The question isn't, do I want to eat this? It's, will this kill me slightly slower than starvation? Still, you're not alone. This time of year, people talk. Word travels fast, even across frozen fields. Down the path, old Edith was spotted chewing something green. In winter. Could be she found something edible in her garden ruins. Could be she's finally gone mad and started eating moss. Historians still argue whether some of these late winter herbal discoveries were actually nutritional or just hopeful hallucinations. You do consider moss for a second, then you remember your walls are full of it. Eating insulation is probably a bad sign. You wander outside, checking on the neighbors' smoke, thin and steady. They've got wood. Maybe they traded something, or maybe they're burning their furniture. Wouldn't be the first time. The village feels smaller in winter, more closed in, everyone indoors, everyone guarding their supplies. Even greetings sound different, more cautious, more clipped. You see Wulfric again, this time sober, or as close as he gets. He nods, then points to the sky. Crow's gone quiet, he says. Bad omen. You want to tell him that everything is a bad omen in February, but you nod back, because really he's not wrong. The crows have vanished, probably smarter than you, flying south. Back home you sit near the fireless hearth, staring. The days blur now. Everything is measured in before the fire went out and after the pot cracked, and when the turnip got weird. Even the sun seems bored, barely lifting above the horizon before sinking back with a sigh. You reach under the bed for the sack of emergency flour, your last. You make a paste, not even pretending it's dough. Flat, hot and sad, you cook it on a stone and call it dinner. Some days you imagine spices, just a pinch of something exotic, something fragrant. You think about cinnamon until you almost taste it. Then the stone cracks, and reality returns with a shrug. The cold has begun to seep into your bones in a way that's hard to shake. You catch yourself staring at the wall for long stretches, imagining what spring might feel like, what green smells like, what it's like to not flinch every time the wind shifts. You curl up with a blanket, rubbing your feet to coax warmth back into them. They're stubborn, almost resentful. You wonder if people in the future will even understand what this was like. The way hunger isn't a growl but a weight. The way cold becomes not just a temperature but a personality. Cold nags, cold mocks, cold erases who you were in the fall and replaces you with someone slower, quieter, more resigned. Outside, snow begins again. Flakes drift past the shutter gaps, soft as whispers. You stare at them, and for a moment you forget to be frustrated. They're almost beautiful, almost. You fall asleep without meaning to, head propped on a sack of straw, fireless and hungry, but somehow still here. And tomorrow, you'll find more turnips, or not. Either way, you'll wake up and try again, because that's what winter demands, and what you do. You wake up to silence, not peaceful silence, the ominous kind, the kind where snow has fallen so thick and so heavy overnight that the world outside feels muffled, blanketed, as if nature is trying to smother all movement, all sound, all evidence of life. Even your breath sounds too loud against it, and yet, no wind, no birds, not even the groan of a neighbor's door on its tired hinge. Your body aches. That familiar stiffness from sleeping half-curled in a chair that was never designed for comfort or really for sitting at all. You stretch, or try to, and your joints make more noise than the outside world. Another morning, another turnip. You chip away the frost from the one you stored closest to the wall and bite into it raw, just to wake up your senses. It doesn't work. It tastes like bitterness and desperation. You chew anyway. It's on days like this that you start to wonder what the nobility are doing. You imagine them in drafty castles, maybe less drafty if they've figured out tapestries, dining on boar and pears soaked in honey, probably not thinking twice about snow or turnips. You wonder if their bones ache too, probably not. But the rest of you, the 99%, you've got chores to do, even if they're meaningless, even if it's just to prove to yourself that you can still move, still function, still resist the creeping hibernation that calls to you like a siren. You gather the slop bucket to toss what little scraps you've collected. Out back, the The snow reaches up to your thighs. There's no path anymore, just memory. You stomp through it, legs burning. The air is so sharp it makes your eyes water, though honestly maybe that's just you. At the edge of the plot, you see something strange, a cluster of prints, not yours, not Wulfric's, definitely not a deer, unless deer have started wearing boots. They don't look fresh though, crusted over, partially filled with new snow, but you pause anyway. You've heard stories, always in winter, of wanderers, of people who didn't make it through the frost and come back wrong, of neighbors who knock and speak strangely, of beggars who curse your house if you don't share your last loaf. Historians still argue whether these winter tales were moral warnings or the result of vitamin deficiencies playing havoc with medieval minds. Either way, they linger. You shake it off and dump the bucket. The slop steams slightly before disappearing into the snow like it never existed. You stand there a moment too long, and then you hear it. Coughing, not yours. It's faint, raspy, maybe behind the tree line, or maybe in your head. You strain to listen but it doesn't repeat. You hurry back inside, shut the door, bar it, just in case. Midday, if you can call it that, brings no warmth, just a vague lightening of the world. You tend your fire, which is down to little more than embers, and ration out a cup of barley water. It's warm, barely, and somehow feels like a luxury. You hold the cup close, cradle it like it's alive. Then comes the knock. You freeze. One soft thump, not insistent, not repeated, just one. You wait. Nothing. You open the shutter a crack. No one, just snow, still falling. This is where the stories begin, isn't it? The ones you'll tell children years from now, about the winter of the Great Silence, about the knock, about how you chose to stay inside, or didn't. You let the thought linger, then laugh at yourself. Tired minds do weird things. The day drags on. You sew a hole in your mitten. You reorganize your turnips. You stare at the fire, willing it to last. Some folks back then swore by ritual during winter. Little superstitions to keep the frost at bay. Bread above the door to ward off starvation spirits. Pine twigs under the bed to chase away nightmares. One particularly eccentric belief was that leaving a spoon of porridge on the doorstep would please the cold lady a local spirit said to steal warmth from your hearth if ignored. You've never believed it, but hey, desperate times. You leave a spoonful outside before dusk, not because you believe, just, why not? Night comes fast and heavy. You pile on all your clothes again and hunker down by the fire. The wind kicks up now, finally breaking the strange silence of earlier. It howls low, like it's circling something. You pull your blanket higher. You dream of warmth, not fire. Sun, bright, blinding golden warmth. Fields of green, running water, the sound of insects. The kind of summer where everything is too loud and too alive. You wake up sweating, not because of the fire, there's barely one left, but because the contrast between dream and reality cuts deep. The cold has teeth now. It waits until you're asleep to bite the hardest. You toss another log in knowing it's your second to last. You whisper to the fire like it's an old friend. Come on, stay with me. The wind changes tone, less howling now, more muttering. You think about those boot prints again, and the cough, and the single knock. Your stomach growls. You feed it another slice of frost-hardened turnip. Chew mechanically. It doesn't help. You glance at the door, then the window, half expecting to see a face. Nothing, just snow. Always snow. You start counting. Not turnips. Those are too depressing. Not hours. There's no reliable sun to track them by. You count the creaks in the roof beams. The number of times the wind hits the door just hard enough to make it tremble. The number of sips left in your water flask if you're careful. 1, 2, 3. You stop at 4 and decide it's better not to know. There's a smell lingering in the corners now. Damp wool and stale air. You open the door just long enough to let in a burst of cold to flush it out, though all that really does is invite your only friend, the cold, back in. You slam it shut, teeth chattering. It's in these hours, stretched thin by hunger and silence, that your mind begins to wander dangerously. You remember voices that aren't here. You see flickers in the corner of your eye, a shadow that looked like your sister, a whisper like your mother's cough. You shake it off. Not ghosts. just memories with excellent timing. You pace the room to stay warm. One step, turn. One step, turn. Like a monk in a cloister. You remember reading somewhere, if you ever actually did read anything, that some monks spent entire winters in near silence, speaking only when necessary. Some historians say it fostered spiritual clarity. Others argue it just made people hallucinate less obviously. Speaking of hallucinations, you swear you smell bread, fresh, warm, with that slightly yeasty sweetness. You close your eyes, breathe in deep. Nope, still turnips. But for a moment it was real, like the mind was reaching through time, digging up some fragment of a happier moment. Maybe that's what nostalgia is, the smell of bread where there is none. You think about Wulfric, about whether he's warm right now, whether he's dead, whether he was ever real. It's hard to tell anymore. With all these days stacked on top of each other like firewood, no one's bothered to burn. Then you hear it again, the cough, clearer now, closer. You move to the window, you wait. This time you see it, just the edge of movement between the trees. A shape, slumped, human, maybe. Could be a branch, could be your brain being a jerk. Could be one of those winter ghosts the village used to whisper about, the ones who only show up to people who haven't eaten in 3 days. You sit back down. This is survival now, knowing when not to investigate. Besides, if it was someone, they're either already dead or smarter than you, and found a better hut to haunt. There's a new rhythm to your day. You realize this as you notch a small line into the side of the hearthstone. A habit now, a crude calendar. Each line a promise, still here, still fighting the turnip war. You glance at the previous ones. 14, 15, could be 45, doesn't matter. You make another mark. By midday, again a generous term, you decide to do something truly reckless. You cook. You dig into the deepest bag and pull out a precious hoard. One small onion shrunken like a dried fig, a pinch of moldy barley, and a single perfect turnip you've been saving like it's gold bullion. You mash them together in a pot, boil them with melted snow and convince yourself it's stew. It's not, but it's warm. And warm is enough. You savor it like it's roast goose. You even close your eyes between bites, chewing slowly, letting the illusion last. You give it a name, Winter Victory Stew. You think about writing that down just for the drama, but paper is scarce, and you're already slightly insane. Later you rearrange the furniture for the 5th time in as many days. Not because it helps, but because it gives you something to do that doesn't involve counting turnips. You drag the bench closer to the fire, stack the kindling by height, polish your eating knife with a rag. Tiny acts of control in a world where control is the first thing to vanish with the snow. You glance again at the door. Still nothing. Still snow. Still you. One of the more obscure facts you remember, possibly invented by your starving brain, is that medieval peasants sometimes talked to their food to keep from losing their minds. You try it now. Looking good today. You tell the last turnip. Very rooty. You smile. A little. Historians still debate whether these behavior patterns were coping mechanisms, spiritual practices, or just the natural result of spending 6 months snowed in with nothing but tubers and rats. You figure probably all three. That night, something changes. The wind dies down again. The silence returns, and this time you realize just how loud silence can be. It buzzes in your ears. It presses against your skin like a second cloak. It makes you itch, makes your heart race for no reason. You stare at the fire until your eyes hurt. Then the knock. Twice this time. Soft, but real. You don't move. You don't even breathe. Then just as quietly, it's followed by footsteps, not walking away, just walking, circling. Your heart pounds so loud you're certain it'll give you away. You sit perfectly still, like prey in a burrow. Your breath fogs in the cold. Your legs cramp. You stay there long after the steps fade. At last you move, just enough to reach for the firewood. Only one log left. You stare at it. Then you do what every rational person does after possibly hearing ghosts or beggars, or your own fraying psyche shuffle through the snow. You burn your last log, not because it makes sense, but because you need one more night of heat. just one. The fire cracks. It hisses. You lean in close and close your eyes, and just before sleep takes you, you hear it again. Not a knock, not footsteps, just a voice, outside, calling your name. You don't answer, because obviously that would be foolish. If horror stories, both medieval and modern, have taught you anything, it's that answering mysterious voices in the dark rarely ends in snacks and hugs. Still, the voice lingers in your head like smoke from the last log curling through your hut. Soft, familiar, almost warm. You curl tighter beneath your cloak and wait for morning, or at least the lighter shade of grey that passes for dawn in this place. When you finally crack open the door, the snow is different. Less angry. The wind has tired of its tantrums. It's strangely quiet, like the land itself has stopped to take a breath. For the first time in weeks, the silence feels less like punishment and more like permission. You step out. Just a few paces. Your breath puffs in clouds. The snow squeaks underfoot, and there it is. Footprints. They circle the hut, just as you thought. Slow, deliberate, not animal, too heavy. One set, and heading toward the edge of the trees. You squint, half expecting them to disappear halfway through, like a story half told. But they don't. They go on, and on. Now comes the dilemma. Do you follow? In a modern setting, the answer would be obvious. You'd call someone, check your doorbell cam, maybe Google how to ghost-proof your cottage. But here, you are the emergency hotline. You are the backup. You are, tragically, the main character. You grab your stick, the one with the notches for measuring soup depth and chasing mice. You tell yourself it's a weapon. That's adorable. Then you follow. The prints lead you into the trees, slowly, carefully, like whoever made them wanted to be followed but not caught. The trees creak above you. Snow drops from branches like sleepy birds stirring. It's beautiful, and deeply unnerving. After some time you find it. A small camp. Well, camp is generous. It's really just a tarp strung between two trees, sheltering a crude bundle of cloth and fur. Smoke curls from a tiny hole in the snow, where a fire pit tries its best to be convincing. There's no sign of the visitor. You stand still, listening, waiting, and then like a rabbit out of frost-bitten air, he appears. Wulfric, or at least someone you've decided is Wulfric. Hard to be sure. Everyone looks the same after losing 20 pounds and their will to groom. His beard is wilder, his eyes brighter, hollow, but lit from within. You made it, he says, like this is a dinner party, and you were just running late. You nod, words feel heavy in your mouth. Fragile, as if speaking might break this fragile truce between madness and reunion. He offers you a seat. You sit. You're not even cold anymore. Your body's given up on telling you when it's uncomfortable. That's how winter wins, by normalizing suffering. You exchange stories, haltingly. He found a stash of dried apples and 2 salted fish in an abandoned storehouse a few days' walk north. He was following rumors. You were just surviving. He jokes that you're both winning in your own way. You laugh, but it feels borrowed. There's something oddly comforting in seeing someone else cracked open by the season. A shared descent into a weird frozen madness. Misery does love company, after all, especially if that company brings fish. Over the tiny fire, you share the last of your stew rations. You pretend it's a feast. He pretends it doesn't taste like despair. You both pretend this is normal. As the day, such as it is, fades, you help him build a better shelter. You braid branches. You stack snow. You pretend you know what you're doing. He shows you how to pack the walls tighter, to cut wind channels around the base, to make the inside reflect heat better. You read a book. You ask. Got very bored one winter, he says, and stole a monk's notes. Classic Wulfric. Historians still argue whether medieval winter survival was more about practical wisdom passed down generations or sheer dumb luck. You're inclined to vote for the second, though a few monks did keep survival journals, tiny scribbled prayers for warmth that double as how-to guides if you squint hard enough. That night, you sleep outside your hut for the first time in weeks, under new branches, beside a fire that someone else tends, with a body next to yours that breathes and mutters in dreams. You wake up confused. There's light, real light, yellow, warm. The sun has made a rare cameo appearance, low in the sky but unmistakable. You blink against it like it's a torch in your face. Wulfric is already awake, grinning at the sky like it owes him money. It's turning, he says, and it is. Not fast, not dramatically, but the light lasts longer. The wind feels more like a whisper than a slap. There's even a bird call, one, shrill and confused, as if it took a wrong turn from spring. It's still cold, still desperate, but now, there's something else. Possibility. You and Wulfric head back to your hut. He helps repair the roof where the snow collapsed it. You show him the notches, the turnip count, your expert level stacking system. He's impressed, or faking it, which is honestly just as good. Together you clean, you organize, you burn what must be burned, you lay the groundwork not for escape, but for endurance. Because the worst of winter may be ending, but it isn't gone. You find a game in the madness. Who can go longer without mentioning how hungry they are? Who can make the saddest meal sound gourmet? Who can remember the weirdest winter remedy? He wins that round. Apparently some folk healers claimed that tying a frog around your neck cured frostbite. Historians have thankfully left that one in the we hope this was a joke category. You learn to laugh again, even if it's soft and short, like a muscle warming up after months of disuse. The last turnip is still there. Neither of you eats it. It's become a symbol now, not of sustenance but of survival, of stubbornness, of your shared refusal to give in entirely. You name it Gregory. Gregory the Indestructible. He sits in the windowsill like a sentry, and somehow with Wulfric's presence and Gregory's grim little face the world feels survivable. And just like that, the cold stops feeling eternal. You still wake up stiff, you still blow frost from your hands before touching anything metal, but now there's warmth in your chest, just a flicker, like the first coals in a reluctant fire. It's enough. Each morning you and Wulfric trudge a little farther from the hut. The snow has begun to rot, not melt, exactly, but soften, collapse, sag like an old roof. It clings to your boots like a needy ghost, but it no longer bites. On one of these walks Wulfric finds tracks. Deer. You both stare at them like a treasure map. You know you're not fast enough. You don't even have a bow, but it's not about hunting. It's about hope, that life still stirs in the forest, that you are not the last two people breathing under a sky made of lead. You tell him the story of Gregory the Indestructible again. He rolls his eyes, then adds a face to the turnip with a piece of charcoal. Now Gregory frowns permanently from the windowsill, silently judging your every poor decision. You feel seen. The fire burns longer each night, the woodpile diminishing slower than before. The wind no longer howls, it sighs. There's a difference. You feel it deep in your bones, somewhere near your sternum, and next to whatever part of you still believes in spring. You've become efficient. That's the word. Not quite skilled, but certainly practiced. You can split kindling without drawing blood. You can patch holes in your roof with frozen moss and swears. You can even make a decent stew with turnip skins, dried mushroom bits, and a haunting memory of salt. The funny thing is, you almost miss the panic. When the worst was upon you, everything had urgency. You were alert. You were focused. You were freezing. Yes, but engaged. Now, with the days stretching a bit longer, there's room, and in that space thoughts sneak in. Questions. What happens after this? You can't stay in the hut forever. The supplies will run dry. Eventually the snow will turn to mud. Roads will reappear. So will other people, some helpful, some not. What will you do? Where will you go? Wulfric asks you one night if you've ever thought of moving to a monastery. You blink. Do I look like someone who can wake up at dawn and chant psalms? Honestly, he says no, but they have walls, food, books, firewood, and rules. That too, he grins. But rules are negotiable when you bring turnips. Historians still debate the extent to which monasteries acted as community shelters during the medieval winter. Some argue they were altruistic havens. Others point out that many charged donations and only opened their doors to those with skills or something worth trading, like say the indomitable spirit of a turnip-wielding survivor. Still, the idea lingers. You imagine cloisters, bell towers, warm bread and soft beds and no wolves. You imagine quiet, not the oppressive snow-dampened kind, but the chosen kind, the kind where your biggest worry is how many candles to use during Vespers. The idea follows you for days. You and Wulfric begin making lists, what you'll need for the walk, what you'll say when you arrive, what to trade, what to carry. You're inventing a future again. It feels luxurious, dangerous, like trusting a thaw that could just be a cruel trick. But you press on. Each day you scout a little farther. You find signs of thaw, branches cracking under new weight, animal tracks that return the way they came, a tuft of rabbit fur caught on a bush, soft, warm, real. You pocket it like treasure. One night you eat the last stew, not the last food, but the last stew, the one that still vaguely resembled a meal. There's a solemnity to it, like closing a chapter. Gregory watches. You both salute him with wooden spoons. Later, you wrap him gently in cloth and place him in your satchel. He's coming too. You leave the hut at first light. It's easier than you expect. Harder too. You look back just once. It looks small, that hut, temporary, like a half-remembered fever dream. You don't want to stay, but you're grateful. Wulfric jokes that you should leave a note, something like, if you find this place, congratulations. You are now officially too stubborn to die. You nod, then write it in charcoal on the inside wall. It feels right. The path is wet, slushy, ugly, but it's a path, and your legs remember how to walk. Your body remembers how to move with purpose. Even your breath fogs less, like it's getting lighter. Or maybe you are. You don't talk much on the way, just the occasional joke or curse, or sigh of mutual disbelief that you're not dead. It's a comfortable silence, the kind only two people who've shared a turnip winter can understand. You reach the monastery after 3 days, mud-caked, tired, hungry, weirdly optimistic. You knock. You expect suspicion. A door cracked 2 inches. A long pause. Instead they open wide. The monk smiles. We were expecting you. You blink. What? He gestures to a wall covered in soot and wax. There, scrawled in scratchy ink, is a list of names. Names of those lost in the storm. Wulfric's is there. Yours is not. Because no one knew where you went. You never made it on the list. You, the monk says, are a miracle. You nod slowly, not sure what that means. They feed you bread, cheese, warm broth that tastes like sunlight and mercy. You sleep on straw in a room with a door, and in the morning you place Gregory in a corner of the garden, under a bell. The monks ask why. He deserves a view, you say, and you don't explain more than that. Now, let the story slow, let your breath even out. You're warm, full, safe. The cold can't touch you now. The wind has stopped its shouting, and even the snow seems to have lost interest in you. Your limbs are heavy, your eyes a little softer. The winter has passed. Not everywhere, not completely, but for you it has. And though the next season will bring its own battles, tonight you rest, in quiet, in gratitude, in the long exhale that follows a season you weren't sure you'd survive. Sleep now, let the turnips stand guard. Let the fire crackle in some distant memory. Let Wulfric mumble in his sleep, and let Gregory, proud and wrinkled, watch over all of it with his perfectly scowly little face. You made it. The long cold dark has passed, and now your eyes grow heavy with the comfort of knowing you endured. Every frost-bitten morning, every frozen finger, every turnip that dared to call itself dinner, all of it. Behind you now, the snow once endless has slowed to a lazy drift, no longer sharp, just soft, a whisper instead of a roar. It coats the earth like a blanket tucking in the roots, assuring them that rest comes before bloom. You feel that rest now, in your legs finally still, in your chest, finally quiet. Even the air in your lungs is warmer now, less like survival, more like peace. Let the past months drift away. Let the cold become a memory, not a fear. Let the silence settle around you like fresh wool, safe, gentle, timeless. The hut still stands somewhere in your mind, empty but proud, a monument to endurance, a funny little footnote in a history most people will never read, but you remember, you lived it. Now let your thoughts blur, no need to stay alert. The fire is still burning, low and kind. Wulfric is humming to himself, probably off key. Gregory is asleep, probably, and you are safe. You are still. You are done for now. Close your eyes. Let go. Breathe deep. and sleep.